The desert sun blazed over Camp Pendleton, California, where dreams came to die and warriors were forged. On the dusty training grounds, 43 Marine recruits stood in perfect formation, their shadows stretching long across the sand. Among them was Emma Reeves, barely 5'3", her frame so slight that her uniform seemed to hang on her like borrowed clothes. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, revealing a face marked by determination and eyes that burned with quiet fire. For 12 weeks, Emma had endured it all. The whispers, the sideways glances, the barely concealed laughter. The nickname had started in week 2, thanks to recruit Tyler Branson, a 6'4" former college linebacker. He'd watched her struggle on the obstacle course, grinned at his friends, and announced loud enough for everyone to hear, "Looks like we got a princess in our unit." The name stuck like glue. Princess became her shadow, following her through every drill, every meal, every single moment of her Marine Corps' journey. Sergeant Blake Morrison stood before the formation, his weathered face telling stories of 2 decades in the Corps. At 41, he'd seen combat in 3 different countries and trained over 2,000 Marines. His reputation was ironclad. He was fair but unforgiving, and he had very specific ideas about who belonged in his Marine Corps. When he looked at Emma, his expression remained neutral, but his report to command had been clear. Too small for frontline operations. Potential risk to unit cohesion. Recommend reassignment to support roles. But this morning was different. Today was the 7-fighter challenge, a brutal tradition at Camp Pendleton that separated the truly skilled from the merely adequate. One recruit would face 7 consecutive opponents in hand-to-hand combat. Each fight lasted until submission or knockout. No breaks between rounds, no mercy, no quitting. In the 30-year history of the challenge, only 12 recruits had ever completed it. The record time was 42 minutes. Most recruits barely made it through 3 opponents before exhaustion or defeat claimed them. Sergeant Morrison's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. The 7-fighter challenge tests not just your physical abilities, but your mental fortitude, your tactical thinking, and your refusal to quit when your body screams at you to stop. Today's volunteer is Recruit Reeves. The formation erupted in barely suppressed murmurs. Emma felt every eye turn toward her. Branson let out a low whistle. "The princess is going to get herself hurt," someone muttered. Morrison silenced them all with a single look. What none of them knew, what Emma had never spoken about during her 12 weeks of training, was that she had been preparing for this moment since she was 6 years old. Her grandmother, Linh Nguyen, had been a fighter in the Vietnamese resistance during the war. A woman barely 5 feet tall, who had taken down soldiers twice her size, using ancient martial arts, passed down through generations of her family. Linh had survived impossible odds, protected villages, and earned respect through skill, not size. When Emma was young, growing up in the small town of Ashland, Oregon, her grandmother would take her into their backyard every evening after dinner. There, hidden from the world, Linh taught her granddaughter Vovinam, a Vietnamese martial art that emphasized using an opponent's strength against them. "Size means nothing," Linh would say in her accented English, her hands guiding Emma's movements. "Physics means everything. A river does not fight the boulder. It flows around it, wears it down, finds its weakness." Now, Emma stepped into the circle drawn in the sand. Her first opponent entered from the opposite side. Trevor Walsh, 6 feet tall, 205 pounds, a former high school wrestling champion with 3 years of mixed martial arts training. He approached the center with a confident swagger, rolling his shoulders, cracking his knuckles. The watching recruits settled in, expecting a quick finish. Morrison raised his hand. "Begin." Walsh moved fast for his size, closing the distance in 3 quick steps. He reached for Emma with both hands, intending to grab and throw her, to end it with sheer force. But Emma was already moving. She slipped to the side at the last possible second, her movement so fluid it seemed almost lazy. As Walsh's momentum carried him forward, Emma's hand shot out, striking a precise point just below his elbow. His arm went numb instantly. Before he could even process what had happened, she was behind him. Her legs swept his ankle while her hands guided his upper body, using his own forward motion against him. Physics and leverage combined in perfect harmony. Walsh hit the ground hard. In the next instant, Emma's knee was on his back, her arm securing his neck in a textbook chokehold. 3 seconds later, he tapped the sand twice. Submission. The circle went absolutely silent. Every recruit, every instructor, stared in disbelief. The fight had lasted less than 10 seconds. Emma stood up, brushed the sand from her knee, and turned her gaze to the line of remaining opponents. There was no triumph in her eyes, only focus. She took a deep breath, centered herself, and waited for the next fighter. The princess was gone. In her place stood a warrior. Her second opponent was Marco Diaz, a boxer from Miami known for his lightning-fast hands. He came at her cautiously, circling, wary after what he'd just witnessed. He threw a series of quick jabs, testing her defenses. Emma didn't block. She redirected. Each punch was guided past her, her hands and forearms flowing like water, deflecting his energy. Diaz got frustrated and threw a powerful right cross, putting his full weight behind it. This was the opening Emma was waiting for. She ducked under the punch, her body coiling like a spring. As she came up, she drove the heel of her palm into his solar plexus. The air whooshed out of Diaz's lungs. He doubled over, gasping, unable to continue. Knockout. 2 down. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, shifting from skepticism to awe. Branson was no longer smiling. His arms were crossed, his brow furrowed in confusion. Sergeant Morrison's face was still a mask of stone, but his eyes followed Emma's every move with a new intensity. The third, fourth, and fifth opponents fell in a similar fashion. A judo expert was thrown with his own momentum. A brawler was taken down with a series of precise nerve strikes. A kickboxer found his legs swept from under him before he could land a single kick. Emma moved with an economy of motion that was almost hypnotic. She never wasted a step, never used more force than was necessary. She was the river her grandmother had spoken of, flowing around every obstacle, wearing down every opponent, finding every weakness. By the time the sixth fighter stepped into the circle, Emma was breathing heavily. Sweat soaked her uniform, plastering it to her small frame. Her muscles burned. This was Jake the Hammer Harrison, a man who seemed carved from granite, and the one everyone had expected to win the challenge. He was a brute force fighter, and he charged at Emma like a bull. He managed to grab her, his powerful arms closing around her like a vice. For a moment, it looked like it was over. The crowd held its breath. But Emma didn't panic. Pinned against his chest, she remembered another of her grandmother's lessons. The tallest tree is the most vulnerable to the wind. She relaxed her body for a split second, then drove her head back into Harrison's nose. There was a sickening crunch. His grip loosened just enough. Emma twisted, dropping her weight and driving her elbow into his ribs. He grunted in pain, and she used that moment to break free. As he staggered back, clutching his broken nose, Emma launched herself into the air, executing a perfect scissor kick to his head. He dropped like a stone. Knockout. Silence. Complete and utter silence fell over the training grounds. Only Emma's ragged breathing could be heard. 6 opponents defeated. 1 to go. And standing on the edge of the circle was the last man. Tyler Branson, the man who had nicknamed her princess. He stepped into the circle slowly, the cocky swagger gone, replaced by a look of grudging respect and a hint of fear. He looked at Emma, then at Sergeant Morrison, as if seeking a way out. But there was none. Morrison's voice was low and clear. Begin. Branson didn't charge. He circled, his big frame tense. He was a linebacker. His strategy was power and tackles. But how do you tackle a ghost? He lunged, trying to grab her, but she was gone, slipping away with that same infuriating grace. He tried again, and again she evaded him, letting him exhaust his energy. The recruits watched, mesmerized. This wasn't a fight. It was a lesson. Finally, Branson roared in frustration and charged one last time, all technique forgotten. Emma stood her ground. Just as he was about to collide with her, she dropped, sweeping his legs out from under him. The 6'4" giant crashed to the ground. Before he could even think to get up, Emma was there, her foot pressed against his throat. Not hard enough to injure, but with enough pressure to make the message clear. The fight was over. She looked down at him, her chest heaving. "Do you submit?" she asked, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. Branson stared up at the warrior who had just dismantled him, who had defeated 6 other men before him. He swallowed, the sound loud in the quiet air. "I submit," he rasped. Emma removed her foot and stepped back. The entire challenge had taken 28 minutes. A new record. She stood alone in the center of the circle, looking not at the defeated men, but at Sergeant Morrison. His stone-faced expression finally broke. A slow, small smile touched his lips. He walked to the center of the circle and stood before her. He didn't offer a hand. Instead, he gave her the highest honor a sergeant can give a recruit. He gave her a sharp, respectful nod. He turned to the stunned formation. "Let this be a lesson to all of you." His voice boomed across the field. A Marine is not defined by their size, but by their spirit, by their refusal to quit. Today, Recruit Reeves has shown you the true meaning of that spirit. He looked back at Emma. There is no princess in this unit. There is only a Marine. From that day on, no one ever called her princess again. They called her by her name, Emma Reeves. And when their unit finally deployed, it was Emma who walked at the front, her quiet fire now a blazing inferno, ready to prove that the most dangerous warriors sometimes come in the smallest packages. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. We'll see you in the next one. Morrison's stopwatch read 28 seconds. Walsh climbed to his feet, shaking his head in disbelief, flexing his arm where feeling was slowly returning. He met Emma's eyes and gave a small nod before leaving the circle. Recruit Dennis Crawford entered next. 6'2", former boxer, known for lightning-fast hands and aggressive style. The watching Marines leaned forward. Maybe the first one was luck, Branson whispered to the recruit beside him. Let's see her handle a real striker. Emma settled into her stance, breathing controlled, heart rate steady. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. The space between heartbeats is where warriors live, Lynn had taught her. Find that space and nothing can touch you there. Crawford came at her like a storm, fists flying in combinations that would have overwhelmed most opponents. But Emma moved like water, flowing around his attacks, letting his punches slide past her by inches. She counted his rhythm, recognized his patterns, waited for the opening. When it came, she struck with surgical precision. A palm strike to his solar plexus stopped his breathing for just a moment. As he gasped, Emma swept his legs and took him down. 45 seconds. Submission. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder now. Morrison's expression remained unreadable, but his eyes had narrowed with interest. This was not luck. This was skill he had never seen before in all his years of training Marines. The third opponent stepped into the circle. The third opponent who entered the circle was Jennifer Cross, the only other woman in the advanced combat program. At 5'9" and 160 pounds of pure muscle, Jennifer had been a college volleyball player, an amateur kickboxer. She had volunteered specifically because she wanted to prove that she could take Emma down. The princess nickname bothered Jennifer almost as much as it bothered Emma, but for different reasons. Jennifer believed it made all female Marines look weak. They faced each other across the sand. Jennifer's eyes were hard, her jaw set. Emma saw no malice there, only determination. Morrison raised his hand and dropped it. The fight began. Jennifer moved with textbook precision, her kicks coming in measured arcs, designed to keep Emma at distance. She had clearly studied Emma's previous 2 fights during the brief moments between rounds. She was staying mobile, refusing to commit fully to any attack, trying to tire Emma out. It was smart strategy. Emma shifted her approach. Instead of waiting for openings, she began to create them. She moved in close, inside Jennifer's kicking range, forcing her into uncomfortable positions. When Jennifer threw a knee strike, Emma caught it, twisted, and used momentum to sweep Jennifer's standing leg. They went to the ground together, and their Emma's technique shined. Within seconds, she had Jennifer's arm locked at an angle that threatened dislocation. Jennifer held out for nearly 30 seconds, trying to power her way free, but physics was undefeated. She tapped. 1 minute and 15 seconds. As Jennifer left the circle, she paused beside Emma. "That was impressive," she said quietly, respect clear in her voice. Emma nodded her thanks, already focusing on the next challenge. The 4th opponent was Marcus Chun, 5'11", master of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with a brown belt, known for his ground game. He entered the circle with quiet confidence. Unlike the others, he showed no aggression, no showboating. He simply took his stance and waited. Morrison called the start. Chun moved like a chess player, each step calculated, each movement purposeful. He was trying to pull Emma into a grappling match where his superior size and ground training would dominate. Emma recognized the trap. She kept the fight standing, using quick strikes to nerve clusters and pressure points that her grandmother had taught her. Chun adapted quickly, but Emma was always 1 step ahead. When he finally managed to close the distance and attempted a takedown, Emma used his own momentum to flip him, landing on top in a dominant position. Her elbow found the pressure point behind his jaw. Chun's eyes went wide, and he tapped immediately. 2 minutes flat, 4 opponents down. Emma's breathing was heavier now, sweat soaking through her uniform. Her muscles burned with the acidic fire of accumulated fatigue. But her mind remained clear and focused. 3 more to go. As she waited for the 5th opponent, Emma's mind drifted to a summer evening 7 years ago. She had been 17, training in her grandmother's backyard as the Oregon sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. That evening, Lynn had been teaching her about fighting through exhaustion. "Your body will lie to you, Emma," Lynn had said, her weathered hands adjusting Emma's stance. "It will tell you that you cannot continue, that you have nothing left. But the body always holds something in reserve. The trick is knowing how to access it without destroying yourself." They had trained that night until Emma could barely stand. Then Lynn had made her continue for another hour. When Emma finally collapsed, her grandmother had knelt beside her. "In the war, I once fought for 6 hours straight," Lynn said softly. "I was smaller than you are now, and I was facing men who wanted to kill me and everyone I loved. I survived not because I was stronger, but because I refused to believe my body when it told me to quit. Remember this feeling, Emma. Remember that you survived it. Next time will be easier." The memory gave Emma strength as the 5th opponent entered the circle. But this time, the mood shifted dramatically. The 5th opponent was Sergeant Blake Morrison himself. The watching recruits erupted in surprised conversation. Morrison had never participated in the 7-fighter challenge as an opponent. He was the overseer, the judge, the authority. But now he stepped into the circle, removing his instructor's cap and setting it carefully outside the boundary line. "Recruit Reeves," his voice carried across the training ground. "I have been watching you very carefully for 12 weeks. I have read your file, reviewed your scores, observed your performance. And I have recommended that you be reassigned to support roles because I believed you did not have what it takes for combat operations. He stepped closer, his expression intense. I am entering this circle not to humiliate you, but because I need to know if what I am seeing is real, or if you have simply been lucky against inexperienced opponents. I have been fighting for 23 years. I have trained in 6 different martial arts. I have used these skills in real combat where the stakes were life and death. If you can hold your own against me, I will withdraw my recommendation and personally sponsor your advancement. Emma met his gaze steadily. She understood what he was offering. This was not about humiliation. This was about respect, about proving herself against someone who truly knew what they were doing. She nodded once. Morrison assumed his fighting stance, and Emma immediately recognized the efficiency of his movements. This was no amateur. This was a warrior who had refined his skills through decades of practice and application. When Morrison moved, it was with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what his body could do. They circled each other. Morrison struck first, a testing jab that Emma slipped easily. He followed with a combination, each strike placed perfectly, each movement designed to set up the next. Emma blocked, redirected, gave ground where necessary. She could feel the difference immediately. Morrison was not fighting with ego or anger. He was fighting with pure technical skill. For 90 seconds, they exchanged strikes and blocks, neither gaining clear advantage. The watching Marines were absolutely silent now, transfixed by the display of skill before them. Morrison increased his pressure, driving forward with a series of attacks that forced Emma back toward the circle's edge. She could feel her body beginning to tire, could feel her reactions slowing by fractions of seconds. Then Morrison made his first mistake. It was tiny, barely noticeable. He shifted his weight a fraction of a second before launching a front kick. Emma saw it, recognized it, and reacted with pure instinct honed by thousands of hours of training. She moved inside the kick before it fully developed, her hand striking the inside of his thigh at a specific nerve cluster. Morrison's leg buckled slightly. In that microsecond of vulnerability, Emma executed a technique her grandmother had called the river bend. She used Morrison's own forward momentum against him, guiding him past his center of balance while simultaneously sweeping his weakened leg. Morrison hit the ground, and Emma followed him down. Her knee found his chest. Her hands controlled both his arms. For 3 seconds, they were locked in position. Then Morrison tapped the ground twice. Emma immediately released him and stepped back. Morrison rose to his feet slowly, testing his leg where feeling was returning. He looked at Emma with an expression she had never seen on his face before. It was respect, pure and undiluted. "That technique," he said, his voice carrying clearly, "I have never seen anything like it. Where did you learn that?" "My grandmother," Emma replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "She was a resistance fighter in Vietnam. She taught me that size does not determine the outcome of a fight. Understanding does." Morrison nodded slowly. Then he did something that shocked everyone present. He extended his hand. Emma shook it, and the watching Marines erupted in spontaneous applause. Morrison stepped out of the circle and raised his voice. "Recruit Reeves has now defeated 5 consecutive opponents, including a senior instructor with over 20 years of combat experience. She has 2 opponents remaining. The circle will continue." As Emma waited for the 6th opponent, she felt something shift in the atmosphere around her. The mockery was gone. The nickname Princess would never be spoken again. She had not just proven herself. She had transformed how every person present understood what combat effectiveness truly meant. But exhaustion was taking its toll. Her legs trembled slightly. Her breathing came in deeper pulls. 2 more opponents waited, and they would be coming fresh, and determined to be the ones who finally stopped her historic run. The sixth opponent entered the circle, and Emma forced herself to focus. Her grandmother's voice whispered in her memory one more time. The last fight is never about strength, Emma. It is always about will. Who wants it more? Who refuses to quit? Answer that question, and you will know who wins. Emma's legs felt like they were made of lead as the sixth opponent stepped into the circle. Dominic Park, 6'1", former college wrestler with a reputation for endurance that matched his technical skill. He had been watching her carefully, studying her patterns, analyzing her techniques. Unlike the others who had entered with confidence or aggression, Dominic entered with calm calculation. He knew Emma was tired. He knew her reactions would be slower. He was going to use that against her. Morrison called the start, and Dominic immediately pressed forward, not with wild attacks, but with relentless pressure. He cut off angles, limited her movement space, forced her to expend energy just maintaining distance. It was intelligent fighting, the kind that wore down opponents through accumulated effort rather than single devastating blows. Emma found herself working harder for every defensive movement, her body protesting with each shift of weight. 30 seconds into the fight, Emma's vision blurred for just a moment. Her grandmother had warned her about this, about the moment when the body begins to shut down non-essential systems to preserve core functions. This is when most fighters lose, Lynn had told her during one of their final training sessions before cancer took her. Not because they cannot continue, but because they convince themselves they cannot. That memory hit Emma with unexpected force. It had been 3 years since her grandmother passed, 3 years since she had held Lynn's frail hand in that Oregon hospital room. In those final days, when pain medication could barely touch the agony eating through her grandmother's body, Lynn had still insisted on teaching. Emma had protested. Grandma, you need to rest. Save your strength. But Lynn had gripped her hand with surprising force. This is my strength, Emma. This knowledge, this tradition, this understanding of how to survive when everything tells you to give up. If I do not pass it to you now, it dies with me. Do you understand? 30 generations of warriors, all leading to you. Do not let us fade into nothing. In that hospital room, with machines beeping and nurses checking vitals, Lynn had taught Emma the final lesson. The most important technique is not a strike or a block or a throw. The most important technique is this. When you have nothing left, when your body is broken and your spirit is crushed, you find one more breath. Then another. Then another. Life is just a series of next breaths. Combat is no different. Dominic threw a combination that Emma barely blocked. Her arms felt heavy, her footwork sloppy. She gave more ground, her back approaching the circle's edge. The watching Marines leaned forward, sensing the tide turning. Dominic saw it too, and pressed harder, sensing victory within reach. Then Emma heard it, not with her ears, but in her heart. Her grandmother's voice, clear as crystal. One more breath, Emma. Just one more. Emma pulled air into her burning lungs and found something she did not know was there. Not new strength, but new clarity. She stopped trying to match Dominic's pressure and instead became like water again, the way Lynn had taught her. When Dominic threw his next combination, Emma did not block or retreat. She flowed into the gap between his strikes, her body moving on pure instinct born from 10,000 hours of practice. Her palm found his solar plexus with precise force. As Dominic gasped, Emma swept his front leg while simultaneously pushing his shoulder. Physics did the rest. Dominic went down and Emma followed, her knee finding his chest, her forearm across his throat. Not crushing, not choking, just present, just undeniable. Dominic's hands slapped the ground. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Emma stood on shaking legs. 6 down, 1 remained. The crowd was no longer just watching. They were witnessing something that would be talked about for years. Even hardened instructors were shaking their heads in disbelief. Morrison stepped forward. "Recruit Reeves, you have already exceeded every expectation. You have proven yourself beyond any doubt. If you wish to stop now, no one would question your courage or your skill. You have nothing left to prove." Emma met his eyes. "With respect, Sergeant Morrison, I have everything left to prove. My grandmother survived 6 hours of combat when she was younger than I am now, fighting for her life and her people's freedom. I can survive 6 more minutes." Morrison nodded slowly, and something like pride flickered across his face. Then he raised his voice to carry across the entire training ground. "The final opponent will be Lieutenant Patrick Hughes. The reaction was immediate. Hughes was a legend at Camp Pendleton. At 34, he was the youngest lieutenant in the combat instruction program and holder of the 7-fighter challenge record. He had completed it in 42 minutes 3 years ago, defeating all 7 opponents without taking a single submission. He taught advanced hand-to-hand combat to special operations units. Marines traveled from other bases just to train with him. Hughes entered the circle, and Emma saw immediately why he was different. He moved with an economy of motion that spoke of absolute mastery. There was no wasted energy, no excess movement. Every step had purpose. His eyes took in Emma's exhausted state in a single glance, cataloging her weaknesses with professional efficiency. But when Hughes spoke, his voice was gentle. "Recruit Reeves, I have been watching you fight for the last 23 minutes. What you have accomplished today is extraordinary. I want you to know that regardless of what happens in the next few minutes, you have my complete respect. Are you ready?" Emma nodded, unable to trust her voice. Morrison raised his hand one final time. "Begin." Hughes did not rush. He circled slowly, forcing Emma to turn, burning more of her dwindling energy. When he finally attacked, it was with surgical precision. A faint high, then a low kick that Emma barely blocked. Her leg went numb from the impact. Hughes immediately followed with a combination that Emma could not fully defend. His fist grazed her ribs, his elbow found her shoulder. Not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to send messages of pain through her nervous system. Emma backpedaled, her defense crumbling. Hughes pressed methodically, professionally. He was not trying to hurt her. He was simply demonstrating the gap between extraordinary skill and absolute mastery. Emma felt tears of frustration burning behind her eyes. She had come so far. 6 opponents down. But this 7th wall was too high to climb. Then Hughes did something unexpected. As Emma stumbled backward, he paused. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Emma saw recognition. Hughes knew what she was feeling, because he had felt it himself once. The moment when the body has nothing left, and the spirit must decide whether to surrender or transcend. "You are thinking about quitting," Hughes said quietly, only loud enough for Emma to hear. "I can see it. You are telling yourself that 6 out of 7 is enough, that no one will blame you, that you have already proven your point." Emma said nothing, her chest heaving. "Let me tell you something, Recruit Reeves. I know about your grandmother. I know about Lin Nguyen. I read your background file before this challenge began. Do you know what struck me most? She never quit. Not when she was outnumbered. Not when she was wounded. Not when everyone told her she was too small, too weak, too female to be a warrior. She kept fighting until the war ended, and then she kept fighting by teaching you. That is her legacy. Not the battles she won, but the refusal to quit that she passed to you." Hughes stepped back and raised his voice. "Recruit Reeves, I am giving you 30 seconds to recover. Then we finish this properly." The crowd murmured in surprise. This was not protocol. But Morrison did not object. He simply watched with intense focus. Emma used those 30 seconds to find her center again, to hear her grandmother's voice one more time. One more breath. Just one more. When Hughes attacked again, Emma was ready. Not with her body, which had nothing left to give, but with her spirit, which had been forged by 3 decades of warrior tradition. She stopped trying to win and simply focused on the next moment, the next breath, the next technique. Their final exchange lasted 4 minutes. To the watching Marines, it looked like a master teaching a student, showing her the highest levels of the art. But those paying close attention saw something else. They saw Emma learning in real time, adapting, growing. They saw her implementing techniques that should not have been possible in her exhausted state. And they saw Hughes, despite his overwhelming advantage, having to work for every point dot in the end. Hughes took Emma down with a perfectly executed throw. His hand went to her throat in a finishing position. But before he applied pressure, he leaned close and whispered, "You have already won. Emma, your grandmother would be so proud." Then he released her and stepped back. "Lieutenant Hughes yields," he announced clearly. The silence that followed was profound. Hughes had never yielded. Not in training, not in the challenge 3 years ago, not ever in his recorded combat history. Morrison stepped forward, his face showing shock for the first time that day. "Lieutenant Hughes, what are you doing?" Morrison asked. Hughes turned to face the assembled Marines. "I yield because Recruit Reeves has demonstrated something more important than the ability to force a submission. She has demonstrated the warrior spirit that this corps was built upon. She defeated 6 opponents through superior technique. Against me, she demonstrated that even when the body fails, the spirit can endure. That is the lesson the 7-Fighter Challenge is meant to teach. She has learned it better than any recruit I have ever witnessed." He helped Emma to her feet. The watching Marines erupted not in applause, but in a thunderous sound that was part roar, part celebration, part recognition of having witnessed something historic. Emma stood on trembling legs, tears finally flowing freely down her face. Not tears of pain or exhaustion, but of release, of accomplishment, of honoring a promise made to a dying grandmother in an Oregon hospital room. Morrison approached and extended his hand once again. "Recruit Reeves, I was wrong about you. Completely and absolutely wrong. I will be withdrawing my recommendation for reassignment and replacing it with a commendation for exceptional performance. Furthermore, I will be requesting that you work with Lieutenant Hughes to develop a training program teaching your grandmother's techniques to other Marines. That knowledge is too valuable to keep Private. Emma shook his hand, barely able to process his words through her exhaustion and emotion. "Thank you, Sergeant Morrison. That would honor my grandmother's memory more than anything else could." As the crowd dispersed and fellow recruits came forward to congratulate her, Emma felt a profound sense of completion. She had not just won a challenge. She had validated 30 generations of warriors who had fought against impossible odds. She had proven that Lin Nguyen's knowledge, Lin Nguyen's courage, and Lin Nguyen's refusal to quit were not artifacts of a bygone era but living truths that could transform modern warriors. That evening, alone in her barracks, Emma opened her footlocker and removed a small photograph. It showed a tiny Vietnamese woman standing beside a tall American soldier, both smiling despite the hardships visible in their faces. On the back, in Lin's careful handwriting, were words Emma had read 1,000 times. "Size does not matter. Heart matters. Pass this forward." Emma held the photograph close. "I did it, Grandma. I passed it forward, and I will keep passing it forward for as long as I live." Outside her window, the California sun set over Camp Pendleton, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Somewhere in that fading light, Emma felt her grandmother's presence, felt her approval, felt the unbroken chain of warriors stretching backward through time and forward into a future where Emma would teach others what Lynn had taught her. The princess was dead. The warrior had been born. And her story was just beginning.